Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is jasmine green tea. Do I hear an echo? Am I getting deja vu? Yeah, I did just recently drink this from Upton Teas on a video, maybe the last video, I'm not sure. But I'm trying to get in the habit when I can to drink green tea a little more often. It's supposed to be good for you, and one of my favorite ones is jasmine. So, yeah, sometimes I'm gonna have to repeat myself, but at least I'll also be enjoying myself. So, I'm doing a Friday reads, which I don't think I've done in a while. I feel like I haven't. But I thought I'd keep you guys up to date. I haven't done a wrap up this month yet. I usually do a mid-month wrap up when I can. But I've been reading a little bit slowly. When I say slowly, not like, molasses, but just not finishing as much as I had expected to at this point. Usually January is one of those months, no matter what kind of time off I have or not. I usually tend to get a lot of reading done. But I don't know. I really think that having gotten a little bit sick earlier in the month didn't help because I did have it was a small fever, but it gave me one of those headaches and it put me in one of those modes where I just start playing some favorite TV shows and wrap up and enjoy that. And I don't regret that because sometimes you need that. So I haven't got as much reading done this month as I would, especially because I'm doing this read about books in January thing. I wanted to be more active in reading and more active in making videos. But I haven't been completely not active. I just, would have liked to do it a little better. But instead of just hating on myself for the rest of this video, let's talk about what I have been reading. And I will start off by saying that I did DNF one book. When I say DNF, it's rare that it's going to be for the rest of my life. I'll never pick that book up again. But I did return it to the library because, well, it was a library book and it was not renewable. And I know that they don't fine you right away for that sort of thing anymore. But I thought, let's keep things simple. If I really, really was into this book, I would just keep it out. But it was the book, I don't remember the name of the authors right now, sorry about that, but it's a pretty recent book, so you may have heard of it. It's called The Library, A Fragile History, and I do love to read books about books and books about book collecting and the history of books. It was a little interesting when it was talking about the Library of Alexandria, because that is, I think, for most book lovers, a thing, what happened to that library and the idea of it. But it was really getting a lot into the ancient libraries, and I felt like it was just going to crawl through that before it got into the history of maybe public libraries. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what I was into at the moment, and it wasn't holding me enough for it being that way. Like if it were something that it was, okay, this is not what I was in the mood for, but their writing is so good that I can't put it down, maybe I would have been okay. So I looked up some reviews to see what other people had said about that, like if they felt the same. And some people said, well, it does pick up as it goes along, but I don't really want to just jump ahead. So I thought, we'll leave that for another time. There's no rush. I have so many other books on my TBR that I want to get to. And I have two books that I feel like I'm really in. One I'm almost finished with, so probably if I were to do another Friday Reads next week, which I don't know if I will, but if I were to, I'm pretty sure this book will be well done at that point, or over anyway. And that is A Girl Walks Into a Book, What the Brontes Taught Me About Life, Love, and Women's Work by Miranda K. Pennington. So that is a memoir about reading the Brontes at different points in the writer's life. A discussion of each book. So yes, very spoiler heavy, but I'm safe because there's only one of the books that I haven't read and I'm not too invested in keeping that spoiler free. And I read the Juliet Barker biography quite recently, so there's no surprises in the life of the Brontes that get brought up within this book. But it has a lot of the biographical bits about the Bronte sisters, especially. Not a lot about the father so far. That's fine because that's not what it's about. And yeah, it's interspersed with the writer's own life, how the reading of these books affected different parts of her life, how it how she related to it, what it taught her, kind of the usual things you'll see in a reading memoir. And and I like it so far. It's not like, it hasn't blown me away, but it's good enough. Like, it's, oh, this is a good book. This is enjoyable. In terms of, I like seeing how books affect people. I love to see how reading books changes in different parts of one's life, which is very much true in her case. Sometimes a book will teach her something, and then she's dealing with maybe a different relationship experience, and now this book is going to tell her something else. I love that. It gets actually quite personal at times. Like, it really does talk about, I don't know if she's changed names or not, but it talks about a lot of different relationships that she's in. And this is a pretty recent book. I think it was published in 2017, I think. So, pretty much everybody in this book is probably still around that I know of so far. So I don't, hope they don't mind, but that's what memoirs do. You talk about people in your life, right? But she also talks about certain other struggles that, maybe Branwell would have related to. I didn't expect that because it didn't come up early in the book. But then, yeah, it's quite a study. So I'm having a good time with this book. As I will always say, if you haven't read most of the Bronte novels and you don't like to be spoiled, I'd wait on this one. But so far it is really good, and I'm, happy to be making a lot of progress in that. I started this one recently. This is part of the classic book club that Jennifer Brooks is doing, and it is a book I wanted to read, so I'm glad I started it already, which is Fathers and Sons by Ivan Turgenev. Turgenev? Oh goodness, I always forget to look up how to say that name before I get here. But either way, it is a pretty good story so far. I'm still in the early stages of it. The father recently picked up his son from, I guess, coming back from school, and the son has a friend who is quite a character. So I'm just basically at the point where it's pretty early on. It's like the next day or so after they arrive, and you're getting to know the family a little bit. You're getting to know the father and the son and this friend and the brother of the father, the uncle, I guess, and his history. And it hasn't riveted me yet, but that's okay, because like I said, I only just really started with it. So and I was finishing up other books as I had started it, so with more on that in different wrap-ups, of course. But yeah, so certain other books that one book that I reread, actually two books that I reread so far this month, and one book, new book from the library, and another book, I think. Anyway, yes, another book that was new to me. So I've already, finished, like, I think 4 books, which I'll talk about another time. At least 2 of them were books about books. So I'm on track, even though I'm not as on track as I would have liked to have been, but that's okay. But as you can see, I'm about to finish a book about books already. So we're getting there. One that was not in my TBR, but I had hoped to have arrived in the library a little bit earlier, and I didn't, but that's okay, because that happens. But it did arrive just this week, and so I got it out from the library. Yay! Making it sound like it was more of a big deal than it was, but it was kind of cool. I love when I'm looking forward to a book, and this is the 3rd book in a series, so I think I look forward to it a little more because I already know that I like the first couple of books. And this is Pages & Co., the 3rd one, The Book Smugglers by Anna James. And I don't know how far I want to talk about this because I might give away something from the first 2 books, but it is similar to another book I'm going to talk about soon. It's similar enough to the concepts of Jasper Ford's books, in that people in this book can become part of a book, or they can jump into a book, basically, be in a story when they're reading, and sometimes extract people from stories. So all kinds of adventures happen. The main character, Tilly, she lives basically at a bookshop with her grandparents and other people, which I can't talk about because it might give something away. But yeah, you see what I mean when it comes to series? It's always like, what can I say and what don't I say? But the thing about these books is that it mainly focuses on children's book characters, and classic children's book characters. So I guess they can't really mess with copyrights and stuff like that. And I can tell just by looking at the cover that we have the Wizard of Oz in here, which should be interesting. Now it's been a while, but it always feels like it was recently. But in somewhat recent years, I remember actually finally reading The Wizard of Oz, because it was a movie that I had seen many years ago. And of course, as a kid, we'd watched that movie many times. And I got less and less scared of the Wicked Witch of the West, but in the beginning it was, a little challenging. But, so, I just took that story as it was. And then eventually I said, I really need to know how different it was from the actual film, because the film is so classic, it's so well known. And there were quite a few changes, which I know about a few of them because I had seen, I think, when I was in elementary school, I think someone put on a school play based on the actual book. And I was like, oh, that didn't happen, or that didn't happen. Actually, was that my class? Was that my class? It might have been my class. Yes, it was. I remember now it was my class because I was sick, thankfully, because I was going to play Toto. I'm so glad that I got sick. I don't like to say that usually, but I am so glad that January I got sick. Anyway, because why was I going to play a dog? But anyway, I didn't think much of it back then. But now, many, many years later, well over 30 years later, I'm very happy to have gotten away from that. Long story short, I did know about some of the differences, but reading the actual book, more. So I'm curious to see how much of that will be covered in here. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because I haven't started the book yet, and I'm just happy to have it right now. See, there's Dorothy in the back. Dressed quite like she was in the film, I guess. Oh, anyway, so moving on. Another book that I would like to start this week, because I mentioned I wanted to read this one, and I just mentioned it already, was the second Thursday Next book from Jasper Ford's series, Lost in a Good Book by, yes, Jasper Ford, 2 Fs. Okay, and I've wanted to get back to this for such a long time, but I'm making goals to do more rereading now, and yet it's taken years to get some firm, good rereading down. So it's been a while since I read this book. So I'm really looking forward to getting back to it. But I was putting it off because I had so much else to read. Not because I didn't want to read it, but, certain things had deadlines because there's certain discussions or whatever that I wanted to finish things in time for. Such as, which I will talk about another time, which I did finish, which I did quite like. But as I've been reading, let's go back to this one. A girl walks into a book, and excuse me if I'm getting distracted, but once again, the lighting in here seems to be making me a little blue. So I want to do something about that. Okay, I don't know if that's actually better or not, but we're going to see where this goes. The ultimate struggle in my life when I make these videos is the lighting. But anyway, when I was reading Girl Walks Into a Book, there was a little part where she writes about reading the Jasper Ford novels and the times that the Bronte books are mentioned and other books are mentioned in the novels. And I was like, oh man, I really just got to get back to it, because it is so rare, even on Booktube. I'm not saying never, it happens, but it is so rare I hear people talk about Jasper Ford's books on Booktube. Unless I'm just not getting the readers, the channels that do read these books. Sometimes I'll see it on Bookstagram, but like I said, it is so not common for me. And considering how bookish we all are, how much we love reading about books, as well as reading books, you know what I mean? Despite, not even counting this month where, I'm putting an actual challenge forward to read more books about books. Just people in general I tend to see like to read books about books when they're on Booktube. So, okay, I'm rambling, but it's true. It does feel a little bit like I don't see these as much as I'd like. And I've heard some people say they don't like the series too. I saw one person who's a pretty big booktuber, when they were asked about Jasper Ford, and they kind of were just very dismissive of it. They wouldn't explain why. So people are allowed to have their reasons. But I love these books, and they were such an important part of my reading life, especially I should say my return to a reading life, because I've never been someone who didn't read since I've known how to read, but I went through that little dry spell where I was just reading not as much. And when I got back into reading a lot, it was kind of just in time to get into these books. So it is such a big part of my reading enjoyment that I feel like it's just been too long. So this is the book where it really gets started into book jumping. I don't remember which book, if it's these books or this book that talk about jumping into books, but either way, stepping into books, becoming part of the book, going into the book world. It's all the same to me. Except these usually cover books that were written for adults. You know, maybe not like too mature, but usually more tended for adult reading. And that's the difference. But yeah, so this, the first book, set the scene and got the characters starting to, who are the bad guys, who are the main characters, who's the love interest, all that sort of thing. And this one is where you really start getting into the actual book world, all the infrastructure involved in the world in fiction. And I just love that. And it's so funny and it's so ridiculous sometimes. So I am like, what's taking me so long? So I'm really hoping at some point this next few days I can start it. And also I need to catch up on my magazine reading, because I have had a number of subscriptions, and some of them came through my job that gave me a bunch of like $2 subscriptions that I went a little nuts about a few months back, and now I'm starting to like tone down again, because I read mostly books, but I do like to read a good periodical from time to time. But one of the ones that I know I want to stay with, this is not a $2 subscription sadly, but I did get a decent enough deal on it, is the BBC History magazine. There's actually two different kinds of BBC History magazines. One of them I think is also called History Extra, which I don't have the subscription for, and maybe I will one day, but I mean, if judging by my falling behind, I would rather not overwhelm myself. I also get other magazines, which I've talked about in the past, Victoria magazine, Tea Time magazine, the National Geographic History, and I also have the National Geographic itself, which I don't read that much, which I probably should stop that one when it's time, among others. But this one, I think, is the meatiest one, the BBC History. I think that in America we get it a little bit behind. I don't know if it would be as much behind if it were digital, but I like the print. I really just like the print so far. And also I think because the my current tablets that I have are pretty old. I hardly ever use them. So, which is another reason why I don't do much e-reading. So it might change if I ever get another tablet and or e-reader, but now's not the time to talk about that because I don't have it. But so this one's a little behind because it's the I think does it have a date in here? I don't know, but it's definitely like the Christmas issue. So that's a little bit in the past, but then again, so is history. History is in the past. So I see here it talks about why World War II was won at Pearl Harbor. Not really my big line of interest, World War II history, military history. Doesn't really float my boat. Doesn't mean I don't like to read about it at all, but then it has soundtrack of the 60s, why the Beatles were in tune with British society. Now that sounds interesting to me because I'm a big Beatles fan. I just love the Beatles. Queen may be my favorite band, but the Beatles, I can't tell you how much I've listened to them, read about them, been to Liverpool, done tons of Beatle-y things. Indeed. So I have everything but have the Beatle haircut wig, which I will not do. Nevertheless. And then also, could Charles I have been deposed by his sister? That's an interesting question. I guess boar's heads and mincemeat omelets, Christmas dinners through the ages. So food history is interesting too. Although I think Lucy Worsley, who I mentioned last time, I think it was last time, mentioned her before. At least I mentioned her recently. I can't remember which videos I did recently. I've been a little bit behind. Oh look, and then they have also in the back, My History Hero by satirist and broadcaster Ian Hislop chooses Alfred the Great. I read a biography on him early 2020, I think. Was it early 2020? Or was it early 2021? I think it was early 2020. Wow. Okay, so I'm doing a thing where I'm kind of rambling, but I will close it off with just a little update on a book that I'm going to be reading throughout the year, which I mentioned in my TBR, I think, for January. But and that is The Assassin's Cloak, uh, an anthology of the world's greatest diarists. I am enjoying this so much. There is quite a variety of people. Some people are more repetitive than others in here. It starts out, I think, with Samuel Pepys, which is great, but there are tons of writers that I've enjoyed reading. There are a lot of other historical figures. There are also people that I find quite despicable that kept diaries, but it's still interesting what they had to write in their diaries. So, yeah, and even Anne Frank, which should come as no surprise, but it took a while, and all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, Anne Frank. She's like the most famous diarist of all. So I'm glad. I'm really enjoying that read. I think I'm going to enjoy it throughout the year. So that's all for now. If you like, you could let me know what you are reading this coming week, what you've been reading, what you've been enjoying, and I will try to comment as soon as possible on your comments, because I know I've been a little behind in that as well. I don't know why. I am the queen of procrastinating, even with things that I enjoy doing. So for now, hope you have a good reading and in general a good week. Hopefully not too cold or not too hot. Just right. This is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book-filled day. Bye.